Hello, Petal. How are you doing? How have things been? So, after that twist on the last chapter, we've got another couple to go, and then we move on to book 7 in the series. But yes, we're nearly done with this one. What's going to happen? What's going on with Angela? What's going on with Karen? What's going on with Jill? What's going on with everybody? Yeah, and if you enjoy this chapter and any of the other ones, if you could hit the like button, if you want to hear more, hit the notifications bell so when I get those instant premieres, or if there are any different times, you can see it popping up going, ooh! And by all means, as ever, please leave a comment if you'd like to. It's always good to hear from everybody, and I appreciate you all so very, very much for being here. One of my favourite things is that we all share this channel, and it means that I can give you audios that you'd like to listen to, and that we all have a little bit banter and we all have a bit of fun. So yes, if you could keep hitting that notifications bell and share and subscribe if you don't already, I appreciate it so very, very much, and I can keep bringing you this content. Woo! Let's get on with May Contain Traces of Magic, J.W. Wells & Co. Book 6, Chapter 14 of 15. We're nearly there. A short while later, Angela found Chris in the bathroom, standing with one foot in the toilet bowl. "What you doing?" she asked, with what he had to concede was admirable restraint. He explained that he'd been trying to get a good look at the top of the bathroom cabinet, which he suspected of starting to come away from the wall. To this end, he'd stood on the toilet seat, but his foot had slipped, and the rest she knew or could figure out for herself. "Oh," she said, "funny thing to be doing at this hour of the night." He shrugged. "I'm an impulse kind of guy." She gave him a sideways kind of look, then said, "And was it?" "What?" "Coming away from the wall, the cabinet." "Didn't get a chance to look." "I'd leave it for now," she said. "Come to bed." In a minute," he replied. "Got to dry off first. In fact, I think I'll have a bath." Angela frowned, said, "Suit yourself," and withdrew. Once she'd gone, Chris lifted his foot out of the toilet, sat on the edge of the bath, closed his eyes, and tried really hard not to scream. Going back the way he'd come wasn't an option then. Bitly unfair, he felt, because if he'd suddenly metamorphosed into a demon, surely that should mean he had special magic superpowers like they had. Apparently, though, it didn't work like that. Or, if it did, it didn't extend to being able to travel by the sanitary express. He put in the plug and turned on the bathtubs. A demon, he thought, for crying out loud. But I don't feel different, not in the slightest. He tried to remember what Jill had told him about. He fumbled in his memory for the technical term. Sleepers? Carriers? Something of the sort. Humans piggybacked on by demons. It was the only explanation he could think of. Lying in the bath, he closed his eyes and tried to poke about inside his own head, looking for his demon lodger, or at least some indication that it had been there. Trouble was, he had no idea what to look for, or how to recognise it if he did happen to find it. Also, it gave him a headache, followed by a nosebleed. He gave up. "All right," Chris said to himself. "Jill dies. Satnav escapes. I pick up a transdimensional squatter. What else?" Something else must have happened, or not happened, because Jill had died instead of Satnav, and if he could only figure out what it was, maybe there'd be some way of putting it right and getting home, or at least back to the school toilets. Figure it out. Right. Piece of cake. Just a matter of doing a degree course in metaphysics and another in temporal mechanics, then spending 50 years doing the maths. Easy peasy. If only, Chris thought, there was someone I can ask. Maybe there was. A remote enough possibility. Quite possibly Derek of the department, owner of the DS polo shirt, hadn't become a demon hunter in this timeline. guaranteed, stone-cold certainty he wouldn't know who Chris was if he turned up on the doorstep with a wild story about demons and Pentecosts, time travel and the Fae. On the other hand, Chris couldn't think of anybody else. Motion carried. He stayed in the bath long after the water had gone cold, to give Angela plenty of time to go to sleep. A nice enough kid, he exaggerated wildly to himself, but not my type. Eventually, shivering a little, he climbed out, dried himself off with a towel, and crept through into the living room. No light on in the bedroom. For now, at any rate, he was comparatively safe. He flopped onto the sofa, pulled the collar of the toweling robe right around his neck, and closed his eyes. He was in his car, but he wasn't moving, and there was nothing to see out of the windows. The radio was playing, so quietly that he could barely hear it, but the song was one he'd recognise anywhere, Shake It Loose by the Lizard-Headed Women. He tried the door, but the handle was jammed. On the fourth savage wrench it came away in his hand. "Now look what you've done," said a voice beside him. "Sat-nav," he said, but even before the words had left his mouth he knew they weren't accurate. Like her, but different. He looked round. Whoever she was, she smiled. Nice smile. "It's all right," she said. "I'm not her, if that's what you're thinking." "But you're one of them, the Fae." "You say it like it's a bad thing to be," she replied defensively, "which is really unfair, particularly," she added pointedly, "coming from one of you." "One of me?" "You, plural, demon kind. If one of us is entitled to think in outmoded species stereotypes, it's me." He groaned aloud. "It's true then," he said. "That's what I am. He couldn't bring himself to say the word. She nodded. "But I am bigoted and instinctively hostile," she said. "Am I holding my nose and sticking 2 fingers down my throat?" She shook her head, and her hair floated around her shoulders, reminding him of... "You could do worse than learn from my example," she said. "It'd make you a better person, believe me." "Bit late for that," he snapped. "Please, can you tell me how long—" "Thought you'd ask," she said. "About 16 years, give or take a month. You are what's known as a carrier. You're familiar with the term?" He nodded. "Is there anything I can do?" he asked. "Or am I stuck with it?" "What are you asking me for? Contact your own kind. Ask them. I'm sure they'll be able to tell you." His own kind. A chill ran down Chris's spine. His own kind had murdered poor Mr. Newsom just for being there, to eat the fear of his last terrified moments. From now on, at least until he could get rid of the loathsome parasite burrowed deep inside him, his own kind was so incomprehensibly alien that the very sight of them made his guts twist like the rubber band on a balsa-wood airplane. His own kind, for crying out loud. Did that imply he had a demon family somewhere on the other side? A demon mother and father, demon aunts and uncles who'd tell him how much he'd grown and how sweet he'd been when he was little, who'd be offended when he forgot their birthdays. 16 years. In this timeline, at any rate. Whatever kind of havoc must he have been responsible for, feeding off emotions for 16 years? "You're upset. I can tell," the Fae said. "Is anything the matter?" Chris had no idea why he'd told her, apart from the fact that she'd asked, and because this was just a dream, so he was just thinking aloud in his sleep. When he'd finished, she made a garage mechanic's tooth-sucking noise and said, "I see." "Well?" "You're screwed," said the Fae. "I really don't see how you're going to get out of that." She sighed, a deep and genuine expression of compassion and regret. "God, I'm glad I'm not you." Nice of her to care, but she really wasn't helping. "Oh," Chris said. "I was hoping you'd be able to suggest something." "Not really. I mean, I'd like nothing more than to be able to say, do this, do that, follow the instructions to the letter, and you'll be home free. Not possible, unfortunately. Terribly sorry to be so useless, but that's a real collector's item of a mess you've got yourself into there. She paused and frowned. And you're telling me it was a Fae who did this to you? One of our lot? He nodded, then said, Hold on. Did this to me? Well, yes, stitched you up. I don't think that's overstating it, do you? I mean, there you are, caught up on the sidelines of this demon civil war thing, but not really involved to any significant extent, and this Fae of yours suckers you into changing history just so she doesn't get killed and stuck in a box for 16 years. Now, that really wasn't a very nice thing to do. Not the sort of behaviour we expect. Right, Chris said, nodding enthusiastically. So, does that mean you'll help me? Your lot, I mean, the Fae, as a point of honour, he added hopefully. Wouldn't have thought so, the Fae replied. Think about it for a moment, will you? The only way you'd be able to undo all the damage and reset to 0 would be to go back to the critical moment, not kill your friend, allow your friend to kill the Fae, and then get someone to take you back to your proper time. And that's not possible. Yes, it is. Must be. After all, she did it. Satnav, she took me there. Illegally, the Fae replied gravely. Completely against the law, mucking about with time. Technically, yes, it can be done, but none of us would ever do a thing like that. Not even to help out someone like yourself. A demon wouldn't have those kinds of scruples, but a demon wouldn't be able to do it. Wrong kind of dimensional focus. The Acme portable door could shift you through time, but they have all been hidden or destroyed, so you can forget that as a possibility. No, she concluded sadly, I don't want to depress you or anything, but there's nothing anybody can do. You're stuck like it. Sucks, I know, but who said life was fair? Somehow, that wasn't what Chris had been expecting. You mean, I've got to spend the rest of my life in this timeline, with a demon stuck inside me? I can't do that. That's just not me. I'm sorry. She smiled at him. Cheer up, she said. Maybe you'll die young, although, she added, there's not very much chance of that, seeing how hard demons are to kill. I mean, you can forget all about your human diseases and old age and all that. A Pantocopt would do it, or a direct strike from a bolt of lightning. I gather there's some poisons, though they're incredibly rare, and I've heard it said that 24 hours in the core of a nuclear reactor's been known to work. Apart from that, though, it's not good, which is why, she added, if you read the small print of nearly all pension schemes, demons are specifically excluded because they live too long. You can see their point, can't you? Chris didn't reply. He was replaying what she'd just told him. It was a Fae who did this to you. Not that he was prepared to take her word for it, or anyone's word for anything anymore, not even if a United Nations delegation headed by God were to come to him and tell him his name, but belief wasn't required, just a calm analysis of the facts. For the reasons given or some other motive, Satnav had included him to change history, and that was why he was here. Her fault, and almost certainly deliberate. Well, he thought, nice to know finally who the enemy is. Cheer up, the Fae said. After all, it could be worse. That Angela seems like a nice enough kid, and so long as you're with her, you'll never go hungry. Absolute genius when it comes to stirring up stress and angst. Stick with her, you'll be all right. He groaned out loud. Hardly something to look forward to. Look, he said desperately, do you think you could find Satnav for me? The Fae who did this to me. Maybe you could talk to her.
Get her to send me back if she's the only one who could do it.
He'd said the wrong thing. I don't think so, she replied icily. I don't associate with entities like that. Oh, I'll find her all right, and then I'll report her to the authorities, and they'll really make her wish she'd stayed in your plastic box, giving you directions. She's in for a really nasty time, if that's any consolation.
No,
not really, Chris wanted to say, but he woke up instead. Angela was standing over him, scowling and shaking his shoulder. What are you doing out here? She said. I've been waiting for you.
Hell, he thought. Sorry, he said. I thought you were asleep. Didn't want to disturb you.
Since when were you so considerate? Her scowl shifted into a grin. He couldn't make up his mind which was scarier. No, believe that. He could. Anyway, Angela said, I'm awake. Come along. On your feet.
I'm very tired,
Chris said. It always worked a charm when Karen said it, but maybe he didn't quite have her delivery, because Angela said, tough, grabbed the lobe of his ear between thumb and forefinger and hauled him out of the chair. You're not still on about that bang on the head, are you? He'd forgotten about that.
Yes, he said immediately. Actually, I've started feeling dizzy and sick, so it could be concussion after all. I really think I should sit down again.
She wasn't happy about it. He could tell. Probably suspected he was lying, but knew she couldn't prove it. Oh, she said. Pity. Never mind. She let go her grip on his ear, and he flopped back into the chair. He had a strange feeling of having just narrowly escaped, like a fish pulling itself free from a hook. Sorry, she said, in a slightly softer voice. It's just that, well, there's few enough perks to being stuck in these monkey suits. Seems a shame to let an opportunity slip, as it were. Chris looked up at her, at the faint gleam in her eyes.
No way, he thought. Not if you were the only girl in the world and I was the only boy. Not even if it had solved global warming. Oh, well, he croaked. There'll be plenty of time later. When I'm better.
He'd said the wrong thing again. She shrugged, see if I care, went back into the bedroom and slammed the door. He wondered if he was still human enough for his emotions to be nutritious, or whether they were like alcohol-free lager. Nothing like the real thing. No way back, the Fae had told him. Stuck here and now for the rest of his life, like a convict transported to Australia. Worse still, there was a huge gap in his understanding of the plot. It was like being back at school, being set some god-awful boring novel to read for English and trying to bluff his way in class based on the basis of the blurb on the back cover. Being back at school. Quite. Chris tried to figure it out, though he didn't dare write anything down or draw helpful diagrams for fear of leaving written evidence lying about that might provoke further suspicion. So, he thought, if Ellie, who got killed in the girls' toilets, was really Sat-Nav all along, then why did Jill want to kill her in the first place? Now, of course, he'd killed Jill instead, and as a result, here he was, shacked up with Angela the trainee, now apparently not dead after all, cheating with her on Karen. Let's not forget that small detail. Not only a demon, but a love rat into the bargain. It just kept on getting better. Forget that aspect just for a moment, though. Concentrate on the mechanics of the thing. Jill came here to find the dissident ringleader, thought she'd found her and killed her, only to discover that she'd slaughtered the wrong victim. Well, fine, that checked out, since Ellie, or Sat-Nav, or whoever, wasn't a demon at all. Then he'd intervened, suckered into it by Sat-Nav, who had a selfish desire not to get killed and stuck in a plastic box. Jill had died instead, but that wasn't all that had happened. At some point during the encounter, Chris Popham, human, had turned into a demon. The practicalities of it he could account for.
Demons can piggyback onto humans, dig down inside their heads and bum a lift, like a hobo on a freight train. You didn't have to be a demonology postgraduate to figure out what must have happened. Just before the Pantacop sliced her in two, Jill's demon must have hopped out of her and into him. Chris laughed out loud, but it wasn't a happy laugh. What are friends for, he asked himself. But there's a limit. Not quite the same as looking after someone's cat for the weekend. The commitment was just a little bit deeper and further reaching. Also, with Jill dead, there was no possibility of ever handing it back. A demon is for life, not just for Christmas. And then there was Karen. He kept forgetting about her, and he felt really bad about that, but he couldn't seem to stop doing it. Karen, also a demon, and who just happened to be in the Toilet of Destiny at the time the key event took place. Something odd about that, he thought. We've got Jill, who's a demon, Ellie, who's a fae, and Karen, also a demon, all in the same toilet at the same time. Coincidence, Chris told himself, but he was wasting his mental breath. Not a coincidence. It just couldn't be. Jill was hunting a demon, the distant ringleader, someone at the school. Karen was at the school. Karen was a demon. Karen? Yes, but think about it for a moment. Jill had told him that the distant ringleader had started at the school not long before the unpleasantness in the girls' bogs. Karen. Christ, he thought. That's right. That's when she came. The start of the spring term, the same time as Ellie. KH for CP, written on a cubicle wall in Biro. Did demons do that? Well, it counted as antisocial behaviour according to the government, so it was wicked and bad and you weren't allowed to do it. But even so, Chris couldn't quite square KH4CP with what he'd learned about demonkind. A demon crosses the line. A demon with a mission to preserve her race by changing their patterns of behaviour at the most fundamental level possible. And practically, the first thing she does is develop a crush on a human boy. No, he thought, does not compute. And besides, Karen and Jill were best friends, and Jill was a top-notch demon assassin. If Karen really was the one who is to come, surely Jill would have noticed at some point. Coincidence, then? Yeah, right. Not that Chris cared particularly, not about whether Karen's demon was the dissident ringleader at any rate. That whole aspect of the business seemed to have gone away, which was just as well. He had plenty of other things to think about. For instance, Angela, in the unbuggered-up timeline, had died, presumably killed by demons. On this side, she was still very much alive. So, he'd changed something. What? A big something, or was it one of those butterflies in the rainforest connections, so apparently trivial you didn't notice it at the time? What exactly had he changed? Well, he thought, I killed Jill. That made him shiver. Had Jill killed Angela? Bloody melodrama, the thing he hated most in the whole world. If so, why? Jill wouldn't scrag an innocent bystander. Well, not twice at any rate, so Angela must have been involved. He remembered the marks of his nails, still visible on the canvas of her Jeep's passenger seat belt 24 hours later. If the demon who'd kidnapped him and drove him to the Ettingate retail park hadn't been in disguise after all, if it really was Angela, demons can't change their shape. Who was it who told him that? Then she must have been after the one who is to come, and Jill killed her because she was getting too close. In that timeline, yes. In this one, she was in the next room, having tried and failed to lure him in there with her. No reason to suppose she wasn't a fundamentalist demon assassin in this timeline, same as in the other, in which case there was probably a case to be made out for assuming that her interest in him probably was not true love. In that case, he wondered, why was he still alive? answer, because she must reckon that he knew where to find the one who is to come, which in sense he did. It had been Jill, by her own admission, who'd taken over the job when the real dissident ringleader had lost her nerve after the toilet massacre. But Jill was dead. Of course, dead, and her demon plausibly located inside poor bloody Chris Popham. Yes, but at the time he'd killed Jill, she hadn't changed sides. Ibuprofen, Chris thought. I need ibuprofen to stop my head bloody well exploding. Don't suppose we've got any, since Karen always reckoned it made her throw up. He massaged his temples with his fingertips instead. It didn't do a blind bit of good. So, Angela's a demon assassin who thinks I might know, consciously or not, how to find the fugitive dissident ringleader. Because I'm still alive, I can probably infer that I'm not in immediate, as in at some point in the next 10 minutes, danger. Jill's dead, Karen's gone, Satnav got me into this mess, but now she's out of it. Also, I'm in an alternative timeline where I don't know what's happened. I'm only assuming I'm a sales rep working for JWW Retail, and if I am, chances are I'm not in line for promotion to area sales manager anymore. Oh, sod, Chris thought. I was looking forward to that. So what to do? Run away? It was the obvious, sensible course of action, as it had been all along, and he hadn't done it. Now, though, there wouldn't be much point. The trouble with running away is that no matter where or how far away you go, whether you flee to the remote mountains or the impenetrable rainforest, neither of which incidentally appealed to him terribly much, you always end up taking yourself with you, which in 9 cases out of 10 utterly defeats the object of the exercise. Wherever he went, probably even Switzerland, the demon would come too, in which case he might as well stay at home and spare himself the jabs and the cost of the ticket. This is so silly, Chris thought. I don't feel the slightest bit different. Surely, if I'm one of them now, I should be brimming over with evil, bloodthirsty impulses. And I'm not. Not that he was complaining. The last thing he needed in this hopefully overcomplicated life was an insatiable craving for blood and terror. Even so, it was an inconsistency, and it nagged at him like a raspberry pip lodged between his teeth. He was too stressed out to stay still, so he stood up and walked around the room, trying to spot the differences. There weren't many. A few things missing. Stuff Karen must have taken when she left. Her stuff, therefore, by definition, not the kind of thing he'd be likely to miss. The drawer where she kept her CDs was empty, but in it was a packet of photos which she either hadn't wanted or had overlooked. Chris opened it and sat down on the sofa. Karen was a person of many talents, of which photography was not one. She had the knack of cutting off people's feet and the tops of their heads, and all the buildings in her pictures looked like they were slowly toppling backwards. Lack of ability had never inhibited her enthusiasm, however. Whenever they went anywhere, day trips or the rare, begrudged holidays, she blazed away like a paparazzo at a Hollywood wedding. Maybe that explained why she hadn't wanted the photos. They were mostly of him, standing in front of things, next to things, always looking grumpy, impatient, and, of course, unnaturally abbreviated. Probably just as well they'd never had kids. Future generations turning the pages of the treasured family album would have gained the distinct impression that great-granddad was a miserable bugger with a flat-topped head who sort of faded away at the ankles. Chris frowned. To a demon, of course, a packet like this was presumably as good as a Mars bar, a compact feast of nostalgia, embarrassment and general guilt. He turned one over, remembering that Karen always wrote on the backs, "Chris and me in London, Chris and me in Birmingham, Chris and me summer holiday in Lanzarote." The odd part of it was, she took pictures by the 100, but he couldn't remember ever seeing her looking at them once they'd been developed and printed. Well, he wasn't particularly interested in foreshortened images of himself. He started to put them back in the envelope, and then paused. Chris remembered that one. It'd been their anniversary, or what she called their anniversary.
He couldn't recall offhand what it was the anniversary of, but he always forgot it. Except this once. On this occasion, he'd managed to remember and had booked a table for them both at the Indian restaurant just across the road. From a brownie point perspective, one of the best things he ever did, though it was ultimately cancelled out when he forgot her birthday. Still, for a short while, he'd been promoted from insensitive pig to closet romantic. And to commemorate the occasion, Karen had battened onto a harmless bystander in the street outside and made him take a picture of the two of them. Whoever he was, the stranger had been a better photographer than Karen. All 4 feet were in the frame, with millimetres to spare, and neither of them looked like a boiled egg about to be invaded by toast soldiers. Chris was wearing his usual "have I got to" expression. Karen was beaming, happiness shining out of her like light from a torch. He noticed that he was wearing a tie. Said, "Oh, really?" Chris put the photos back in the drawer and closed it firmly. It was dawning on him that demonhood wasn't the only thing about Karen that he hadn't bothered to notice until it was too late. Also worth bearing in mind that you didn't have to be a demon to make a real mess of somebody's emotions. Humans can do it too. He thought about that. A large part of it he knew only too well was that he'd never really believed that anybody who didn't have to could ever really love him. Sure, Karen had said she did, in so many words, but he'd always assumed that she must be exaggerating or trying to be nice, and that her reasons for choosing him were something like his own: rebound, compromise, making do so as to get the whole tiresome pairing off business over and done with. He'd been wrong about that. Natural enough mistake to make, but a mistake nonetheless. And look at the damage it had done. Yes, he told himself, but she wasn't human. You can't beat yourself up over being a complete bastard to a malevolent transdimensional entity. They don't count. Chris thought about that too. He thought, demons feed on emotion, so what better habitat could they ask for than true love, the genuine article, except no substitutes? No different from humans under those circumstances, no different from the way human lovers nourish each other, needing no external sources of supply. If you were a demon and someone loved you, there'd be no point in going hunting and scavenging when there was someone whose greatest pleasure in life was feeding you. The perfect arrangement, in fact. He could see that now. It was painfully obvious, but so were gravity and the displacement of water for 1,000,000 years, until someone had the wit to notice them. It had to be that. The key discovery made by the demon dissident ringleader. He could picture the eureka moment, the sudden switching on of a blinding bright light that for a healthy, balanced, organic, sustainable, additive-free, calorie-controlled diet, all you need is love. The door opened. Angela was standing in the doorway, looking at him. She had the most extraordinary expression on her face. "It's you," she said. Chris looked round at her. "You what?" "It's you." Wipe her voice on a microscope slide and analyse it scientifically, and you'd find a substantial traces of shock, stunned bewilderment, anger and resentment, with just a little hint of residual disbelief. "You're it. How the hell can you be it? That's just not possible." "Angela, what the hell you're the one who is to come." She stabbed the words at him. "Don't even think of denying it. I could smell it from in there. It stinks the place out. You're the one I was sent here to find. But that's crazy. It's stupid. You can't be. You just can't." Mixed signals, he couldn't help feeling. "Make your bloody mind up, can't you?" he said. She looked at him again. "It's you," she said. "Definitely." "Bollocks." Chris took a step back. "No, really, it can't be me. I'm not even a demon. Well, I wasn't one until very recently, and that's a very long story, but I promise you I'm not. Honest." "It's you," Angela repeated, her voice as cold as ice. "Sorry about this, but I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." Another 3 steps back, and then the wall, with which he'd never had any quarrel, had to interfere and block him.
Angela, I swear to God, I am not a real demon. It got into me in a toilet, but it's Jill's, really. Only you'll never have met her, of course. She died before you were born." He was gabbling, but he couldn't stop, and she was getting closer. "What do you mean?" he said desperately. "You can smell it. I can't smell anything." "Demon 8845223, Angela said hoarsely. "I'm arresting you on 17 counts of disruptive, deviant and antisocial behaviour. You have the right to remain silent." "This is silly. I'm not a demon," Chris yelled. And as the words left his mouth, he knew that he was lying. Maybe it had been asleep and she'd woken it up, or maybe it had been watching all the time and realised that this time it was going to have to make a fight of it. He felt it grow inside him, like one of those fold-away umbrellas where you press a button and suddenly it erupts to fill all the available space. He could feel his skin turning into scale armour, his teeth and nails evolving into weapons, like the Incredible Hulk, he guessed, only not so hard in the wardrobe. He tried to say, "Now, let's be reasonable about this," but it came out as a long, rattling hiss. He felt his ears go back, which was extremely disconcerting. "Oh, well," he thought, "so I really am one after all, in spite of everything. Shucks. If you can't beat them, eat them." He was grinning. Fun, he thought. Haven't had a good scrap in such a long time. Angela had changed too, just a little bit. Her eyes were round red saucers staring out of a crazy paved grey face. Her small, thin fingers were meat hooks and her open mouth was full of needles. Curiously, she was far less scary now than she'd been an hour ago. "No bother," Chris told himself. "I can take her easy as pie, even if I am a bit out of practice." He crouched, digging his toe claws into the carpet for better purchase, waiting for her to spring. When it came, he sidestepped easily, letting her sail past him into the wall. There was a crunch and a brief flurry of plaster dust. Karen would be so pissed off, he thought. But Angela recovered quickly and lunged again, and once again Chris took an easy couple of paces left and back and let her pass him, only this time he reached out his right arm and raked her neck with his claws. She squealed as the blood spurted and slashed at him backhand, so fast he barely had time to get clear. She missed and demolished a small table that Karen had bought in home base. Where her blood flecked the carpet, it sizzled. Chris was thinking, "It's good to be back, good to be normal again. And when my teeth meet in her neck, will there be enough human in her still to taste of anything?" Also, he couldn't help thinking, this is so much better than love, that pale, watery substitute, nouvelle cuisine to a hamburger, all served up fancy with a scalloped carrot, but nothing you can get your teeth into. So much for love, then. As Crocodile Dundee so memorably said, you can live on it, but it tastes like shit. He was almost minded to attack, but he remembered that he was still quite rusty after his long hibernation. Better to let her come to him. He took a step back and opened his guard invitingly. Angela accepted the invitation and sprang. This time, as Chris twitched his feet out of the way, he hammered the side of her head with his balled fist. She hadn't been expecting that. The blow dropped her to her knees, but she just about managed to recover into a semblance of a guard. Not to worry, plenty of time, though his mother wouldn't have approved, he knew. "Don't play with your food," she used to say. Oh, but this was so much better than being human. He was alive again for the first time in 16 years, so why the hell shouldn't he indulge himself just a little bit? "You realise you're resisting arrest?" Angela panted through a mouthful of loosened fangs. That's a crime. You're going to be in so much trouble." Chris reached in and punched her again. She was so slow she hardly moved at all before the punch went home and knocked her down. Enough of this, he thought. It's getting boring. He shot out a hand, grabbed her by one ear, dragged her to her feet and started to strangle her. He paused. There was a human in the room. Several humans, in fact. They must have come in while his attention was elsewhere. Most of them he didn't know, but the face of the one nearest to him was familiar in that horrible other life of his. He'd borrowed this human's polo shirt. "Derek," he said. "You're Derek, from Jill's work. Piss off, I'm busy." The human didn't answer. Of course not, because Chris had spoken in Pandemonian, the language of his own people, which humans couldn't understand. Like it mattered. He knew without needing to ask what the humans were doing here. They were Delendy Sunt.
The demon hunters, the enemy of his kind that changed things. He let go of Angela's neck and muttered,
"You know who this lot are."
She nodded. "You're still under arrest, though."
"Fine,"
he replied.
"Later."
She grinned. The humans were trying to surround them, which was not good. They might be mere mortals, but they were not stupid.
"Back to back,"
Chris grunted, and thankfully Angela had the sense to do as she was told. He tried roaring, but although they were plainly scared, yummy yummy, they kept their positions. He tried a couple of trial swipes, but collected nothing more than a few nailfuls of scalp.
"Cover the female,"
Derek was saying.
"I'll take the male."
Courage, a rich, slightly salty taste, not sweet like terror. Odd though. What did a stupid human have to feel courageous about? Then he saw something in Derek's hand, a square yellow box from which the human drew a long, thin steel tape.
"Oh,"
Chris thought.
"One of those."
But so what? He was a demon, faster, stronger, infinitely better motivated, and still starving hungry. His eyes fixed on the yellow tape, Chris took a step forward, balanced his weight, and went for the lunge. The pant-copped blade caught him on the neck, just above the collarbone, and carried on going until it came out through the thigh bone on the opposite side. He had just enough time to taste his opponent's joyous relief and to mutter, "Shit," under his breath. And then he died.
Oh.
So what's going to happen now? What dimension did he die in? Did he die? Or did he not die? Who died? Will Angela survive? Is Angela still alive? Who knows? I hope you enjoyed this chapter. It was full of action and dynamicisms. It was fun. So we've got one more chapter to go on this one, and then we start Life, Liberty and the Pursuit of Sausages, book 7 of 8 in the series. Book 8 we've already done. We did it at Christmas, and it was the 8 Reindeer of the Apocalypse, which was so much fun and so awesome. But yes, we've got one more chapter here to tie things off neatly, like a link of sausages, and then we go into Life, Liberty and the Pursuit. See what I did there? Demon meat sausages. Hey! Oh, I'm so funny. I'm not really. So, yes. Hear the thunder, hear the roar. Thundercats are loose. I used to love that tune. That was awesome. Who was your favourite Thundercat? Did you watch it? Mine was Panthro and Battlecat. He was quite cool, but then again, Schnarf had a certain appeal. He was a bean. Yes. And Skeletor has a new career now, if you've noticed in the memes. He's a very funny meme nowadays, of so many different types. Until we meet again. Right, I'm going to stop waffling. Yes, so this is the penultimate chapter. I hope you enjoyed it. If you can, hit the notifications bell, the like button. It helps the channel no end. I appreciate you all for being here. I am so glad that you're all here. I really enjoy our little conversations and how everybody gets involved, and it makes me so very happy that we're all in it together, sort of thing. So that's really lovely. And looking at the results of the poll, it looks like what we'll try and do going forward, and I'll try and work this out for summer, is, or even in the next few weeks, try and do some sort of like banter with playing Planet Crafter, because we've made a really fantastic planet. It looks really awesome. And have a little bit of chitter chatter. See if we can do that live. If you guys want to join in, let me just work out the blibbity blobbies of that. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. We'll work it out. And also the way to do sort of like live reads, because if I don't have to put my makeup on and get all dressed up, it's easier. I can just read away for you. And I'm thinking it'd probably be better to do things like Grimm's Fairy Tales or things that are copyright free. You know, it makes life so much easier. Yes, we like this. We like this. And I'm open to suggestions. Short stories would be awesome. Just anything that's kind of like in the public sphere, and easy to read from that sort of sense. So, yes. Anywho, I think I've whiffled for far too long and long enough.
Have some good rest. Take it easy. Have a good weekend, what's left of it, or even just have a good day. As I always say, take it easy, stay safe, and I'll see you in a couple of days, Petal. I don't know where that was going, and you know what? I'm going to leave it as it is. See you soon, Petal.